How is everybody?
Good. Never been better.
Everyone.
Hey, thank
I
you.
want to start out today. I want to start out getting our blood going, getting our thoughts going, and want to start out with a very simple question, and that is, what if Adam Smith was wrong? You know, he wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, the same year our country was formed. The whole idea of the use of technology and the pin factory and the competition at the farmer's market, you know, sort of the better mousetrap philosophy that we have around meaningful commerce. But what if he was wrong? So I want to start with a very simple story. Recently, our friends at General Motors, which is now being led by, I think, one of the greatest leaders they've had since Sloan, Mary Barra. And what they're doing is they're closing plants, and what they're doing is they're using the money to build electronic vehicles, which is going to be the future. Autonomous electronic vehicles. It's going to be great. But I want to point something out. Everyone right now, when we talk about innovation, is talking about tech, kind of like gearheads. They're talking about, you know, Tesla and things that go whiz bang and things that have hard lumpy objects. And Tesla, of course, had an interesting year last year. They sold 365,000 cars, which means they finally met their quota for 2015. They only lost $700 million in quarter four. But in the car industry in general, in the passenger car industry, is about 80 million cars a year worldwide. 80 million. So 365,000 cars is kind of rounding error. Now, interestingly enough, and I'm not making fun of Tesla, it's a great company doing a lot of really good things. During that same last 3 years of time, what's happened that's been very interesting is that ride sharing has increased 15% year over year. And this is what we call a diffusion curve. It means that something is going down and something else is going up. And usually that's a sure sign that some innovation is afoot. Now, here's the interesting thing. What this basically means is that the type of technical or technological innovation that we're all in love with is being supplanted by a social form of innovation. Now, ask yourself, where's the innovation in Uber or Lyft or any of those places? You know, it's not, the app isn't particularly good. The IPO wasn't good. They're being sued by everyone. The innovation is that people don't believe they need to have a car anymore, and they'll get in a car with a stranger. So think about the car that you've got. You're going to drive it for a couple of hours a day, and the rest of the time it sits somewhere. So whatever cars are going to be sold in the future, given that what ride sharing is going on, that car is going to have a much higher marginal utility rate. And what it means is this trend of negative 5% is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. In other words, you bet on the wrong horse. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. I want you to think about how our peer adversaries are attacking this country. They're not attacking with all kinds of advanced technologies. They're doing things like social media. They're using technologies in different ways. And what I need everybody on this video cast to understand is that innovation is far more than just technology. We have to think about this differently. I love the quote from the famous philosopher Schopenhauer: "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." Think about it. Talk to somebody about monetary policy, military strategy, what should go on with public health. Right? Whatever they personally believe, they look for reinforcement. They're not getting any smarter, and this becomes a problem. It's sometimes called the Dunning-Kruger effect or confirmation bias, and there's a reason it's a big problem. And the reason is we see what we want to believe, not what we need to know. So right around Christmas, there was one of the top business magazines in this country published an article about Alibaba, and they were talking about the Chinese system of Tencent and Baidu and Alibaba, and how it's all combined together, and how on November 11th, on Friends Day, Alibaba sold $25 billion worth of merchandise, which was about 4 times more than was sold on Black Friday in the United States. And the article basically said, Alibaba is to Amazon what Amazon was to Sears. And I thought about this for a minute, and I thought whoever the reporter was did not know the history of Sears. Now, let me tell the story of Sears in a way that maybe those of us who are kind of my age might remember. Does anybody remember who got into email first? It was called CompuServe, Sears. Anybody remember who took commercial financial services and made them consumer financial services? It was called Dean Witter, Sears. In fact, Dean Witter's child was called Morgan Stanley. Anybody remember what commercial real estate became available to residential real estate? Caldwell Banker. The first card that had perks and protection, the Discover card. The first bundle that integrated insurance company, Allstate, Sears, Sears, Sears. Before there was eBay, there was Prodigy. Sears, Sears, Sears. Sears got to the future first. The early 1980s, the late 1970s. So the story that Sears didn't innovate is completely wrong. It's told from people who weren't there, who weren't paying attention, and there's tons of these. Starlight Fairchild, Grand Circus, go down the line. There's a ton of these stories that we get wrong. So what can we learn about innovation from Sears? First of all, it had nothing to do with launching stuff. It had to do with a lack of focus. Too many things, too many people, things were all over the place. Unrealistic timelines. Does this sound familiar? We want something to be paid out right now, but some things take 3 times, 4 times, 5 times as long, much more money. Surrendering to external pressures, shareholder demands and customer needs. There's always a senator who wants something built in their particular state. Failure to integrate and synchronize. How did all the Sears stuff go together? There's no solar system, no ecosystem, no sun in which everything goes around. My favorite one, the old guard waiting out the new. The enemy of innovation is in conflict. It's apathy. It's passive-aggressive behavior. So those people came up in the Sears stores, just waited people out. The same things that we see in military operations. 2 years from now, this will all go away. And finally, pursuing the past. The worst of all growth strategies is an increasing share of a decreasing market. The greatest saddle company in the United States was a Worthington Saddle Company in 1900. They made over 1 million saddles, right? Last year, they made less than 2,000 saddles. The best damn saddle makers in America, but we didn't need saddles anymore. And you can replace saddles with whatever technology you want to think about. Think about aircraft that are now the saddles. So the trouble with the world is not that people know too little. It's that they know so many things that just aren't so. This is the problem of what we call dominant logic. You've got some form of logic and you believe everything conforms to the logic. Everything's going to be technology. It's all about technology. If we just stand up a new unit, it's going to solve everything. Well, I want to tell you a story about technology. About 1984, I had a project with Steve Jobs and his team at Apple, and it came from the Department of Labor. And it had to do with using high technology to train people to drive a truck. And while driving a truck, it was to train them to be literate. It was to overcome illiteracy. We had a great big grant. We did it in Detroit and Los Angeles and had a couple different names for it. And when we were done with the project, it took us 2 or 3 years. We went and looked at the data, and guess what? Did we solve illiteracy? No. Actually, illiteracy not only didn't shrink, it got a little worse in the control groups we were looking at. So interestingly enough, about 6 or 7 years later, I got a call from the editor of Life magazine. It went out of business in 1990. And what they were trying to do, because they knew they were going out of business, is they were writing about the 100 most important innovators of the past century in the United States. And so the woman called me up and she said, I want to talk about your great uncle. And I said, what? She said, your great uncle, Robert Fair DeGraff. And I said, I've never heard of it. My father didn't get along very well with his father, so I didn't really know much about that side of the family. Well, it turns out one of my uncles invented paperback books, right? One of my great uncles invented paperback books. He created a company called Pocket Books. Now, there was a biography written about him, which a family member sent to me about 20 years ago, called 2-Bit Culture. And basically, he thought, if you could make a paperback book for 25 cents and put it in the train station, right, that's a technology, everybody would become literate. And guess what he found? It didn't work. So just like what I learned decades later, he learned with paperback books. Now scroll forward. About 12, 13 years ago, a friend of mine, I ran into him in Florida. He said, I'm setting up this incredible thing in Kalamazoo, Michigan, my hometown. It's going to be called the Kalamazoo Promise. And what it means is anybody who went to high school in Kalamazoo is going to get to go to college for free. We're going to raise a sinking fund. We've got a couple rich families. This is what we're going to do. Well, I thought this is an interesting thing, but I'm wondering if this whole kind of innovation isn't really going to change the achievement gap. And the achievement gap is the top graduates and the bottom graduates. What's happening is there's becoming a bigger and bigger achievement gap. Well, the assumption was what? The assumption was money will shrink the achievement gap. The Upjohn Company, or the Upjohn Foundation did a study after 10 years of looking at the Kalamazoo Promise, and guess what? The achievement gap didn't get smaller, it got bigger. Now, what's the moral of the story? We always think money or technology or process or strategy is going to solve everything. It doesn't. What solves things is thinking differently, leading differently, and having a radically different culture. Throwing money at things doesn't work. The art of progress is to preserve order amid change and to preserve change amid order. One of my favorites, Alfred North Whitehead. Now, something important to note. This sounds like fashion talk, doesn't it? This year's fashion is hard but soft, round but square, tall but short. No. What Whitehead is saying is he's saying we have two challenges that we have to deal with. The first challenge is we have to maintain a system that actually works. We have great militaries and great universities and great businesses, and we have to maintain them by reducing variation, by creating standards, by having discipline. These are going to be vertical kinds of institutions. I'm a product of them. You go to the best schools, you earn all your chevrons. You fight your way to the top. You build things and you show that you've really optimized every gift that you possibly have. But at some point, we have to deviate. Now, this is a very important idea for everybody on this videocast. Innovation is a form of positive deviance. Innovation is a form of positive deviance, meaning that the more unusual it is, the more unique it is, the more novel it is, assuming it's useful, the more valuable it is. So there's another part of our organizations that we have to increase variation, we have to diversify, we have to be agile, we have to move horizontally. This is what venture capitalists do. They hedge, they spread the field, they're trying to look for what kinds of things are going to actually stand out. So they're making smaller but wider bets. This is what individuals do. You grow your life, and at some point you have to figure out, I need an opportunity to become better and new. Now, for most people, this tension between the radical new, the tension between sort of the old guard is usually considered bad. What I'm telling you is this is the most important tension that any organization can have, because the constructive conflict creates innovation. Constructive conflict creates innovation. Don't believe it? Look at the 21 places in the United States that produce most of the intellectual property. And what you're going to notice is they're far more diverse, not just ethnically, but also cognitively, than the surrounding areas. There's something about difference that drives innovation. This is our cultural piece. Now, I love this quote from my hero, John Dewey, the great American philosopher. Conflict is the gadfly of thought. It stirs us to observation and memory. It instigates to invention. It shocks us out of our sheep-like passivity. It sets us noting and contriving. What Dewey is saying it is, as Americans, what we do is we push and shove. It's our way. It's our way of engaging in conflict. When we test us, we're not the smartest country in the world. I'm sorry, I wish we were, right? When we test us, we're not the most moral country in the world. When we test us, what happens is we move more, we marry and divorce more, we hurt each other more. We're a rather ballistic culture. There's some downsides to the culture, but what we also are is the most innovative culture on the planet because of our heterogeneous nature. Now, something to notice. Starting in the early 1990s, my wife Stanley and I started investigating the notion of constructive conflict. We started wondering, does it really pay? And what this came out of was there's a number of innovation indexes, and what we noticed was that none of them were beating the growth index on Wall Street, the Russell 2500. So we started looking for indicators or proxies that were oppositional. And what we noticed is when we found them, and it took us a good decade of research to find them, incidentally, when we found them, we found that these companies actually outperformed the growth index. So this isn't just like a Myers-Briggs test or a DISC test. This is saying if, in fact, you can create constructive conflict, it pays. Innovation pays, but only in certain situations. So it's more than just a cultural piece. It actually has an accountability piece, a quantitative piece. But I like what Einstein said here. Not everything that can be counted counts. And not everything that counts can be counted. And what Einstein meant was, there's more to this than just the whole idea of your run rate. There's more to this than just the idea of your metrics. So I want to ask everybody your question. What do you do with an old friend who's gone troll, right? I'm sure you've got a friend like this who's gone troll, you know what I mean? And it's not just about politics or religion. I want you to think about something like GMOs. You know, I want you to think about a friend who you really like, you went to college with him. Let's call him Phil. Phil went to college and he was a great guy and everything was great, but all of a sudden Phil started posting these manifestos online about GMOs, Frankenfood, they're trying to kill us. And then what you might do is you start out by trying to be rational. And you might say, well, Phil, that's an interesting point of view. You know, I read this article in Scientific America that said, you know, a third of the world would starve if we didn't have this. And does Phil say, oh, Jeff, thank you? No. Phil fires back an even longer manifesto and says, oh, that's because Scientific America is owned by Cargill, you know, and Monsanto, and whoever the boogeyman is today. And then you listen to Phil go on and on about this for a while because you really like Phil, but after a while you get tired of him and you hide Phil, right? You hide him. And then one day you go apple picking with your family and you post the pictures of, you know, little so-and-so and little so-and-so apple picking, and Phil posts a very large and kind of very difficult response or comment that says, you know, apples are the worst of all the things in GMO. And what you do in a moment of hostility is what? You unfriend Phil. On a dark night, on a dark road, we never hear from Phil again, right? The Spanish Inquisition couldn't have thought of this. We never hear from the loyal opposition. We only hear from all the people like all the same crap we believe. And what happens is more and more we become micro-segmented, isolated. It becomes easy to sell us stuff. It becomes easy to tell us stuff. Right? The same kind of bands, the same kinds of, you know, the same kind of community organizations. And eventually we have no opportunity to create constructive conflict and to grow. We've eliminated all of that. Now, some of you are familiar with this model. It's called the Innovation Genome, but it's also called the Competing Values Framework. It was actually started by two people who brought me to Michigan, Robert Quinn and Kim Cameron. I'm the third researcher on this model. Many of you went to business school. I'm sure you've learned this. But basically it says that there are four competing values or four different ways of doing things, and they push against each other. They produce this constructive conflict. These four things aren't just about leadership. They have everything to do with the type of culture, competencies, and communities your organization is likely to produce. We have the largest database of any culture survey in the world on this whole issue. And finally, these footprints or these fingerprints about culture and competency and community tell us a lot about how your company is going to achieve or not achieve its growth plan. It tells us a lot about the outcomes that you're likely to create. So it's not just I'm this way and you're this way. It tells us a lot about these forces. In essence, it's largely like a cosmology. So let's talk about this for a minute. There are two sets of tensions that every organization has to deal with, and every leader has to deal with. The first tension is the tension of magnitude, or how much innovation do we want? Do we want radical innovation with a lot of risk? This is like a startup company. Can't compete on scope or scale, right? This is a venture capitalist investment. We're going to hedge. We're going to try and see where the fish are. We're going to fish for them. The opposite of that, right, what we're going to call the aft position or the control position, is that we have to get things very large, so we have to standardize and eliminate things. This is where you get stage gating systems and portfolio management systems and all the kind of, you know, all the 12-step methods you like to use, TRIZ and anything that's got sort of the kind of real functionality around it that creates restrictions. Do you feel this tension at work? The tension between trying to do something that's very ad hoc, very kind of unusual and novel, and the tension of doing things that can be produced at scale. This first tension is good. It's the tension of magnitude, or how much. Now, the second tension we really feel in America, because the second tension, the tension about producing producing results immediately, because we trade on a quarterly basis on our stock market, and we watch the ticker microseconds at a time. The object is, it doesn't matter whether it's aerospace or tangerines, we're trying to make money. I'm a product of this view. I'm a baby boomer in America. Baby boomers. We went to the moon. We licked the commies. We built the net. We're boomers, right? That's what we did. We're very competitive. We grade on a curve like we do here at Michigan. Now, the opposite of that is what we're going to call the collaborate position. The opposite of that is trying to make something sustainable. This is about momentum, or how fast we have to go. Something sustainable. Do you feel the tension between getting things done right now and the tension in your organization between things that are going to take longer? And this is incidentally our children. Our children, think about your kids. Your kids, they've opted out of all the institutions my generation opted into. We know that most births unto women under the age of 30 are outside of marriage. I've been married forever, right? We ask them about what they want to do for a living. They don't want to work for your company. They want to work for themselves or with their buddies and take 3 months off to cure river blindness. And they're post-capitalist. They have a political candidate who uses the word socialism, which was unheard of in my generation, right? Finally, when we ask them what's the number one religion of people under the age of 30, these late millennials and these Gen Zers, the answer is simple: no religion. So they've opted out of the institutions that my generation, the blue generation, used. They're connected in a clannish way. They're connected by their values. Now, this is important because American culture traditionally has been this blue culture, but you're seeing the shift, aren't you? You're seeing it in the political rhetoric. You're seeing it in how businesses run. You're seeing it everywhere. Now, this tension is also good. This is the tension of magnitude. How much, how fast, how much and how fast. Now, this happens at all three levels. It happens at the level of the situation or the strategic level. How do we compete? Somebody's going to compete some way. We have to compete a different way. So if you think about, for example, our peer adversaries, right? Think about a peer adversary that's got, a 20-to-1 advantage on how many STEM engineers they're going to have. They're going to compete in a very monological or in a very straight up way. And think about maybe our advantage. Our advantage is going to be very heterogeneous. So we're going to have to compete in a very different way on our diversity. I want you to think about organizations, and I want you to think about how organizations function. Think about a financial organization that's going to really tip towards blue. It's all about making money. Think about a university like the one I teach at that's going to tip yellow because it's all about, teaching students. And finally, think about yourself. So this is like a great big Matryoshka doll, big Russian nesting doll. You have to put everything together. Everything has to go together for this to work. So let's deconstruct this relatively quickly. I like to use movies because everybody can imagine movies. So from the create perspective, they're held together by vision. They're radical innovators, but they're high risk and their momentum is relatively medium. I want you to think of that scene where Ed Harris comes in Apollo 13 and throws all the stuff on the table, right? And they have to rebuild something in real time. They have to improvise everything. So they have to go through the failure cycle very quickly. This is a classic example of a green company. Incidentally, that's what cyber grants are supposed to be, these kind of companies. Very agile, very fast, very radical, doing something very interesting. Well, the opposite of that is the control position, which is held together by process, because there's a lot of complexity. Whatever we're doing for the military, it has to scale. If it doesn't scale, we don't have a deal. So these are going to be relatively low or incremental innovations. They're going to have very little risk because we're going to have to use them in combat. That's why we can't say, oh, we got quantum computing and we're going to put it on the battlefield in the next 3 months. We're 10, 15, 12, who knows how many years away from that before we can actually scale that idea. One of my favorite movies about that is Moneyball. Think of the Jonah Hill character who comes in and he talks about looking at the statistics. And the poor Oakland A's who can't compete with the New York Yankees or any of the rich teams, they come in and they take a very different strategy based on numbers. They're following the numbers. And interestingly enough, this is what goes on with everything. That's how we find out initially that a baseball team is cheating. We find out that sumo wrestlers are, in fact, the fix is in. It comes from Gary Becker's work at the University of Chicago, or what you know as Freakonomics, right? If we look at the numbers, we begin to see outliers. We get to see patterns, right? This is the opposite way of doing things. The first one is trying to get things by widening the array, right? By hedging. The second one by optimizing, by the bottom of the funnel. Now, let's look at the next two issues. Let's look at the issue of speed, right? Look at the compete position, the traditional American position, the fighting position. We're goal-oriented, right? I got the gold medal. The rest of you learn to drink, right? Our magnitude is medium. Our sustainability is low, but we're fast. We got teams called Tiger Team and Go Team and Win Team and Strike Force, and that's kind of what we do. We're very aggressive, right? I love the movie The Big Short because The Big Short gets into this. Right? What's the old saying? Bears make money, bulls make money, pigs get slaughtered. What they do in this movie, is they look at the data, they cut through all of the crap, they talk about what they think is going on, and they basically zero in on how they can make money. True story, I was an advisor to the Federal Reserve during this period of time. What was interesting to me is many of us knew what was going to happen, and we talked to everyone, Congress, we took out full-page ads in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and we said, this thing is gonna crash. Everybody's giving you a bunch of baloney. We gotta focus this thing. Nobody listened, and most people lost their shirts, right? We're kind of going through that today again, aren't we? Kind of interesting time, isn't it? Now, finally, the opposite of that is the collaborate position, or about values. This is the movie Gandhi, where Gandhi comes out and he says, my brothers and sisters, India is about bread and salt. And he says, India is about our values and our connectedness and our history. So the magnitude is medium, and they're very slow. Takes a long time to build a great culture, doesn't it? But the sustainability is high. These are cultures that are dynastic. I want you to think about, the University of Chicago, School of Economics, or the New Zealand All Blacks, or the Concertgebouw, symphony. I want you to think of things that are great generation after generation after generation because they've built in sustainability. Now, what's the point? The point is how you innovate is what you innovate. How you innovate is what you innovate. It's like a toolkit. You have a hammer, a wrench, a saw, and a screwdriver, but they're not interchangeable, right? You have to use one for different jobs, and that's the problem we have. Someone will say, I want radical innovation, and you'll say, great, what are you doing? Well, I got a stage gate system. Well, that's actually designed to de-risk innovation. You're not going to get radical innovation out of that. You're going to de-risk it. Or someone will say, really, what I'm trying to do is something really that's going to require some amazing talent. You'll say, great, how are you doing it? Well, I'm running a portfolio management technique. Well, that's not going to help you get the best players on the team. You're using the wrong tool. You have to use the appropriate approach to get the result you want. Now, obviously, these things have a more modern articulation that relates to the world of innovation and connects to the world of technology that I started by discrediting. So if you think about the create position, one of the things that's very interesting to me is that we really are in the middle of coins, collaborative open innovation networks, and creativity clusters. I happen to live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that has an insane amount of venture capital for a very small city. The reason is a whole bunch of people come here to start things, just like Austin, just like a whole bunch of places in this country and in the world, I might add. The opposite of that is sort of tech. It's stuff that we mostly talk about, AI, AR. Some of you know I'm a technologist by trade. My doctorate's in a technological area, right? And this is going to continue to happen. There's always going to be a new technology, at least in the foreseeable future. Money, that blue position, microfinancing, and cryptocurrencies. We haven't seen the end of that at all. What happens when we disintermediate all the big investment banks? And of course, finally, people. What's happening with people is very interesting, and that is people don't stay in the same places anymore. They don't believe the same stuff anymore. The notion is people are competing in federations. They're not joining big organizations. They're creating small organizations. Think of it like, remember when the Home Depot moved into your hometown and got rid of all the small hardware stores? And what's happened recently is all the small hardware stores have gotten together, buy en masse, know what's going on in the large markets, and they're getting rid of these stores, right? So the Jedi have returned. Now, a few things I want to leave you with, a few ideas about how this actually works. Innovation doesn't work from the inside out. It works from the outside in because it's a form of deviance. So the more you try and launch innovation in the center of your company, the more you're going to have a problem. Forget the 80-20 rule. That's an engineering rule. Remember the 20-80 rule. The 20-80 rule is it's easier to change 20% of your company 80% than it is to change 80% of your company 20%. All you have to do is find where companies in a crisis. It's just like people. When do people really change? When they got a drinking problem, or they got a divorce, or they lose the business, or they go bankrupt, right? They lose the job. Why do people innovate in that situation? Because the risk of trying something radical and the reward of staying where you're at is reversed. This is true for Apple, which was trading below $5 a share in 1997. They took the safety off, right? They were playing to win. Interestingly enough, this is why it's not so much peer adversaries, it's non-state actors you have to watch. People who have nothing to lose. The other time that people really innovate is when they're on a roll. Think about Elon Musk. He lost $700 million in Q4, but people believe he's on a roll. He's throwing sevens, and rightfully so. SpaceX, he blew up a couple of satellites last year, cost him a couple $1 billion, right? But he's on a roll. Now he's launching the neuroscience thing because risk and reward is reversed also when you're on a roll. Innovation doesn't move inside out. moves outside in, right? I want to add to this. There are three phases to innovation that every organization has to deal with. The first phase, what we're going to call the forward position, is the create phase. And this is the phase where we hedge. Now, the problem with the create phase is they become orphans. This is my challenge to the small cyber companies. Small cyber companies talk to other small companies, and the problem is they never relate to anything that has to scale because they can't compete on scope or scale, so they try radical stuff. So the problem is really interesting think tanks and really interesting R&D centers become orphans. The middling positions, the blue and yellow, the compete and collaborate, the problem that they've got is a very simple problem, which is it's dogs and cats. We have to be ambidextrous between these two parts, and it's the longest cycle of the innovation cycle, sometimes called Death Valley or the bottom of the bathtub. So we also have to platoon players on and off. This is where things take 3 times as long. It's like Dante's quote, which is on the gates of Harvard, abandon all hope, ye who enter here, right? This is the purgatory. Finally, the aft position has a problem, and that is they never see it coming. The aft position is all about optimizing everything, everybody doing everything the right way. And what happens is one day, something shows up that says we're going to have to deviate the system, and they're completely unprepared. It's a relatively timely comment given what's going on with the virus, right, in our country, right? Did anybody see this coming? And if you didn't see it coming, why didn't you see it coming? Now, I want to talk about very quickly how this relates to economics. This is what's called Schumpeter's scale. And there's a whole branch of economics called innovation economics, and it's really based on Schumpeter. So I'm going to put Jeff's model on Joe's model. So Jeff's model, and this is Schumpeter's term, Schumpeter says companies are started by entrepreneurs. In fact, Schumpeter is the one who brings back the 17th century term. He says it's founded by a person who wants to be free and show the autonomous man, show the superior person, right? He would say women too. He was a very progressive man. But what Schumpeter points out is that these organizations typically fail because they can't get scope or scale. They can't get their feet under them. They can't get financing. They can't get to scale. And he says what happens next is the person who's actually built companies before jumps in. This is the blue point of view. So we get rid of most of the stuff the Greens do. We focus on 3 things. Now we got Spark, we got Tinder, boom, we got fire. Then the yellows come in because we got to sell to the right people, we got to hire the right people. And finally, the reds come in because we've got to scale. We've got a large military. We've got an apparatus. We've got a right way and a wrong way of doing things. And this is Schumpeter's warning to all of us. He calls this the point of creative destruction. And he says at the very moment that you are at the peak of success, he says the seeds of our undoing are sown at the pinnacle of our success. And he says at the very moment that you've conquered, that you've won the Cold War, that you've got the best company, every person on the Capital Committee, every metric that you run, every good person that you hire is designed to eliminate deviance. We have seen the enemy, and he is us. These are 9 Nobel Prize winners since 1969 that said Adam Smith was wrong. We're not killed by competitors. We kill ourselves with our dominant logic. So things to think about going forward. Obviously, when we think about what's going on with cyber, we want to build a pyramid from the bottom. And the pyramid at the bottom starts with places like universities. University of Michigan, second largest research university in the United States. I think it's the 3rd largest in the world. Hopkins, I think, is number 1. Then we got to hire the right people, develop the right people. Then we got to build businesses. Then we got to do something radical. But I want you to think about if, in fact, you really want to be a leader in innovation, you have to tip the funnel upside down. And that's why all the best VCs are in these top research towns. Because the only way to really make money, the only way to win a war is to see a winning idea before anybody else sees a winning idea. And the way you do that is you got to hug up to where the science is being done. My favorite quote of all time from Russell, Bertrand Russell, the whole problem with the world is that fools and fanatics are so certain of themselves. But why are people so full of doubts? The more somebody's certain, the more I'm concerned about it. So I'm going to give you a few things to think about, and we'll call it a day. First of all, assemble a diversity of perspectives. When's the last time you hired somebody that didn't agree with you? Engage in the conflict, right? Respectfully. So the notion isn't trigger words and all this. The notion is we're going to talk respectfully, but we're going to have this conversation, right? Can you imagine if the healthcare debate was done this way, instead of wasting $1 trillion on lobbying, if we actually tried to fix it? We took the 2 points of view and put them together, there'd be a million solutions to this, but we're not having it. We're yelling across the fence. Establish a shared vision or goal. It's one of the things Americans do really well. We're going to go to the moon. We're going to fix the environment. Let's fix something. And finally, construct hybrid solutions. Let's do something that's not ordinary. It's not a compromise. It's not, oh, we're going to, peanut butter and chocolate. No. Let's find a third way, a better way, a new way of doing things. That's the American way. So let's make decisions. Let's decide what we're going to stop. Because I want to tell everybody here, maybe the key to innovation in your organization isn't starting anything new. Maybe the key is stopping some of the old stuff. Then once you've stopped things, then start things. Stop, then start. Finally, take a higher point of view. In order to make this work, you're going to have to look around your dominant logic. You're going to have to look in the rearview mirror and see what your challenges are. Ride what moves and move your feet. You're not going to make innovation happen. Innovation happens at a much larger scale. Everything that's going on in the world, do you have a line of sight to it? Do you know what's going on in all the different places in the world and all the technologies? Have you snuggled up to these research places? Have you changed your bandwidth and looked at places? Maybe it's homeless people. Maybe it's what young people are doing. The cavalry ain't coming. Yeah, your SIBR grant's great or whatever you're working on, but the cavalry ain't coming. You got to save yourself. There's only a few choices. You can run. Where are you going to run these days in the world? You can fight. I love that. That's what the young people tell me. We're going to fight the man. The man's going to put a can of whoop ass on you. You can't fight the man. Oh, you're going to capitulate, a piece of pay, 2 years from retirement. Yeah. Or you can do what? You can model what innovative thinking looks like. You can model changing it. Remember to master the art of so do too. See one, do one, teach one. You want to have a dynasty? Right? Start by having people watch your highly practiced people do something. That's why we train medical students, right? Then we do what? We put a scalpel in the hand and say, it's your turn, junior. And finally, after they do that for about 10 years, they become the attending physician and they teach young people. You want to make this sustainable and growable? See one, do one, teach one. Hide inside Trojan horses. Everybody's got a pet project. The Pentagon's got pet projects. Your company's got pet projects. Take your radical idea and hide inside that project. It gets money, guns, and lawyers. Fail early, fail often, and fail off Broadway. Very important idea here. Don't fail in front of your big client. Don't fail in the Air Force. Find a client that's away. Find a client that's maybe not your biggest client and work it out off Broadway. Right? When Camelot opened in Toronto in 1959, it was 7.5 hours. It took them about a year to get it chopped down to bring it on Broadway. What would have happened if they would have opened at 7.5 hours? Don't fail in front of your big clients. Show, don't tell, the famous Walter Isaacson story, which is true. Right? When I was very young, I was an advisor to Steve Jobs. Interestingly enough, the whole idea of the iPod was originally carved out of a bar of ivory soap. Right? Why? Call Clem. We're going to do some whittling. Why? Because we wanted to feel it. We wanted to know what that was going to look like. So instead of explaining with numbers, build prototypes, use your camera, use plastic, show us what it's going to look like. And most importantly, do the creative work the company can't. That's why we're here. We're trying to help the military. We have to do the creative work that they can't, not because they're not smart enough or good enough. They are. But they've got a lot of rules. They're still in the maintenance position. They're counting on us. They're counting on us for more radical innovation, more breakthrough stuff, and to go faster and better, to sync it up for them. And we have to leave room for the stuff we don't know now. What's going to happen? What's going to happen in a year after this whole virus thing blows over, or if it doesn't blow over? Well, we got to make room for that. Finally, I want you to remember the DeGraff hypothesis. The amount of innovation an organization produces is inversely related to the number of PowerPoint slides or elaborate process diagrams it makes about innovation. In the words of our friend Phil Knight, just do it. If you want to learn more, you want to see, there's a number of videos on this, how to be better at this, feel free to go to my website. Feel free to follow me. I write about this on a regular basis. And most importantly, to everybody on this video cast, I wish you every success in making innovation happen. We're counting on you. This is important. Thanks for making time for me.